The future of construction is changing, and more women are stepping into roles that shape the built environment. Today, I'm joined by Darlene Septelka, a longtime instructor in the University of Washington's construction management program, to share her perspective on the opportunities ahead for the next generation. Hello, Darlene. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jeff. We've been putting this off for a few years, so I'm glad we finally found a time that works for both of us to sit and chat.
Hi, Darlene. I'm Jasmine. I'm so happy for you to be here today. Thank you so much for taking time to interview with us.
It's great to meet you, Jasmine, and I'm happy to hear that the students from the business school are looking over at the College of Built Environment as elective courses to support their business track.
So, Darlene, when people focus on a building, they usually focus on the design or the end result, but you said the real story is about the people who build it. So, who are these people today, and how is that changing?
That's a really good question. The construction workers workforce is getting more diverse. That's for sure. I started back in the 70s, and the only woman on a nuclear, construction of a nuclear power plant, and the only woman out there in the field with a hard hat on. So things have changed. Our construction management programs, definitely the percentage is increased at the UW, but also just recently when I interviewed at Renton Tech College, their percentages are way up and increasing faster than it is for men. So obviously, the for women, there's definitely on the educational side, I'm seeing more and more women taking courses or educational tracks. And I also see the diversity there. When I came back to teach full time after I retired from Boeing, I was amazed at the diversity in the class. And so I would sit there and look out at, 40, 5 students and thought back of when I sat in the class and how the diversity has changed. And when I invited speakers, that's the first thing that they would comment. And they were like, oh, wow, this is such a diverse class. That's really good. And so, in the educational side, I think we're attracting people, we're attracting both women and diversity. Where the challenge comes is for construction, of course, is in the workforce. And in the field is definitely a more of a challenge. Women only represent 4%, but there is more opportunities for women in the professional tracks in construction and management, and I'll talk about that probably in another question. I had some concerns with the latest numbers. So, it's changing.
Okay, so for a woman in high school or college who's never considered construction as a profession, high level, what kind of careers are there out there for them?
Though there's various careers, and most of the time there's a lot of energy and a lot of educational program focusing on the craft portion of construction. The trades. Become an electrician, become a welder, become a laborer, become an iron worker, and things like that. That there's that there, and there's a whole lot of new programs and things like that are opening and showing women that there is there. Where I find is that we probably don't get the word out as much as construction management. Um, it's interesting if I look at the business side of it, and in the college percentage, Jasmine, in your classes, what is just roughly what is the percentage of women in your classes?
I'd say there's actually a good amount of women.
Yeah.
Maybe some classes there's more women than there are men. Um, so yeah, it's surprising and it's nice.
See, that's the difference is that in the business school, women are not hesitant. They're attracting, they're wanting to go in and manage. What the
Mhm.
word is we don't really get it out there that construction, that's what you're doing. It's people, it's managing projects, managing budgets, getting projects, managing clients, the
Mhm.
same things that Jasmine, you would be learning in your classes.
Yeah,
In the
exactly.
business class, it's just our CM programs are related more to managing the construction business, which has some differences to it versus going to be a manager at the Boeing company or Microsoft or things like that. What you're managing has, definitely a different type of risk level to it.
Mhm.
But the positive side, which is we don't get out to people, is that every project's different. And that's exciting that you're not, sitting at a desk at Boeing for, 25 years, managing the plane manufacturing line. Your every project's new, exciting, a new
Mhm.
team to learn from, and we don't get that excitement level down to the high school age when they're considering a career. They just see all that, um, oh, so I got to be a carpenter. They don't see that the difference is that we do have a track that's professional in management.
Yeah, you mentioned high school students, including young women earning varsity letters in skilled trades like welding. What does that signal to you about where the industry is heading and the possible opportunities available to them?
When I read that article, that was pretty exciting for me, and I watched the little video that they had taken. Um, I my education started in high school at a vocational school, and we were labeled Vokies, and we were somewhat looked down upon if we went into the trades. Oh, you're not college. And again, remember, this is the 60s. Oh, you're not college material. And I was also turned down by the universities because I was at a vocational high school. I ended up going to a technical college for my associate's degree. But what it signaled to me is that these women were proud. These women took the initiative. These women saw. It was, to me, it just gave me the energy that I, heard and saw that,
Yeah.
wow, these gals, can you imagine the leaders they're going to be? And one of them said, yes, they already had a position at Boeing all lined up, out of high school. And, we need to look at college. There's two tracks we can go to. In that college, yes, I'm not putting down college. Hey, I've been a professor at colleges. I'm not putting down that track, but we also have to give kudos and tell students there is two possibilities. There are two types of tracks that you can go to. There's the technical track or there's the college track. And I don't think we get the word out that much about the technical track. And these gals saw that at high school. It's just think about
Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s, only people that were these varsity boys walking around had those sweaters with
Yeah.
letters, and for me to think about, wow, this gal who's learned to weld is going to walk around with a sweater with a letter. I was just I really want to go up and visit that program. I
Mhm.
haven't had a chance to do that, but I would love to do that and interview and write an article for
Yeah.
Daily Journal of Commerce or someone else about my experience, especially through the lens of construction.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so amazing to see how much things have changed, and seeing women do what they want to do, and not really following a path that uh, maybe society tells them that they need to go to, or the typical conventional path. They make their own path. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so amazing to see how much things have changed. Um, I have another question. You've seen more women entering the construction programs, as you said, and stepping into roles like project management and estimating. What are you noticing about this next generation of women, and like how they're thinking about their careers and like what they're looking for?
Well, in the past Daily Journal of Commerce's, I've, interviewed several women just recently, the RTC gals and, the UW the year before that are climbing the ladder. What I'm finding about is they are proud,
Yeah.
they are brave, they know they're not going in it blindfolded. They understand there's challenges, but they're not going to let the challenges stop them. They still have a little bit of hesitation of, they don't want to be recognized, oh, you're a woman in construction. They want to be recognized, I'm a project manager on this project, not that I'm a woman project manager. And that stood out because when I was interviewing them for the Daily Journal of Commerce, especially the UW students the year before, they were a little nervous. We don't want to be classified as women construction managers. We want to be classified and recognized as construction managers and not have that word segregate us.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm really excited and proud about this next generation coming up. Um, the role that they're willing to take on, and they're really willing to take the path further, and they're willing to um, give a hand out to the women behind them. And that was a big thing for them, is making sure that they could mentor women that were in high school or were going to be new to the career. Here they hadn't even graduated yet, and they're talking about, how can they help the women that follow them. And that's a big key, is giving that helping hand to women that follow.
Going more onto that, we're seeing more women enter the field, as you mentioned, but fewer move into leadership roles. From your perspective, what makes that step more difficult than it should be specifically for these women entering the field?
So that number that I just published um, actually surprised me. And so I've been following this data for several years, and I never saw the dip that it took this year. And that sends a message out. So the professional track in the construction BLS data is is moving in construction industry, is moves every year and is making great gains, and the percentage is high. That dip in loss of jobs in the management role, I asked that question in my article, is I can't answer that. Is it women because of their age, where they're at in the leadership and management role? They're looking at family and maybe stepping out to for a year or two to do a sabbatical and have a family. I can't say if there's the term that's called not the broken, not the glass ceiling. This isn't a glass ceiling issue. This is what they now term as the broken rung. And so it's that first rung into that management category. Is it broken in our industry? Our industry does a great job of getting out there and selling itself as a place for women. But do we, in the background, is there a broken rung where women aren't proceeding up that ladder in the management and leadership role? The professional role, it's looking like the growth is there, it's continuing to grow. But I question that loss of jobs. Why so many? Considering how many men that were gained between the years, and I can pull out the numbers, but in general, it was a huge difference between the number of men that was gained in leadership versus the number of women, and the number of women lost was huge. Uh, and I can't answer that, but it's a question that industry needs to stop. That term broken rung, that's from the, back, it needs to be taken seriously and look at it internally within our companies. Do they have a broken rung?
Okay. Well, for someone just starting out, what are a few things they can do on their own early on to set themselves for growth and leadership?
Um, for one thing, making sure they have a circle of friends and mentors around them. Um, when I interview the women, I still do hear stories that are challenging and disappointing to me, but I face reality. So they need to make sure they have a network behind them. So if they have some challenging conversations, or feeling like they're not fitting in on the job or fitting in at the table, that they have a cohort that can be men and women. It's not, I'm not saying that a mentor has to be a woman, but making sure they have the right mentor behind them. I remember when I first had my first field position, my my manager pulled me aside and said that we tried a woman, again, this was early 70s. We tried a woman. She was out in the field and she was very aggressive, and when she heard things or saw things, she would argue with them and be combative with the people. That didn't work very well for her. So I'm bringing this up with you is that yes, it might be unfair what you hear or see, but it's up to you how you take that. That was the best advice I ever had. And from then on, I realized no, I walk with my head high, and I walk tall. And if I hear things or see things, I don't let that. I believe I belong here. And that's the biggest thing, is that I belong here. And again, this is in the 70s, a whole different story. That would be the thing that I would tell women coming up. You need to believe that this industry, you belong.
Nice. So if more women step into and grow into this industry, what might the future of the construction industry look like?
Um, I don't want to label it as women versus men, or any kind of the diversity level. I want to What I want to get back to is that a diverse management team, whether it's architects, engineers, business management students, coming to the table and solving project problems, or real estate, coming to the table. It's not the color of them. It's not whether they're a woman or man, but that diversity level brings different answers. And that's what I see, that the more diversity we have, the more success the projects will be.
Good. All right, switching topics here, more back to you. Said a little bit about your background, but can you go into a little bit more about your background in construction and how you first entered the industry?
When someone asks me that question and you have 53 years of experience, or you started, in 1972, how do you answer that in a quick sentence? Um, so I went and did a technical degree, as I mentioned earlier. I couldn't get into the 4-year colleges, and so I started with as a draftsman. They called us, that's what they called. So I started on the table, and so I worked my way up. I went to night school, and I hired on with Stone and Webster, a big architectural engineer company who was also a contractor in the nuclear industry. And so that's where I started on the drafting table, drawing structural drawings of the reactor building, the concrete drawings for that. So that's where I started. And so for me, over the next 53 years, it was continuing to get education. I went back when, I was, 33 to finish my bachelor's degree. I was in my 40s when I got my master's degree. So, it was this constant drive of continuing to educate myself so that I could advance along with where I wanted to go with my jobs. And so I started as a draftsman. I retired from Boeing as an international construction manager. I managed projects over the world, including 3 years in China. And I retired from Boeing and then hired on with the UW full time, and then taught for the last 5 years as a construction management professor. So it's big and wide, and many years and many different projects, winding through those many years.
Good. Well, winding back many years ago, 25 or so years ago, you and I were classmates in the CM Master's program and met somewhere. I wish we had a picture. We did get a picture more a couple of years ago at graduation with one of our mentors, Schaufelberger. Professor Schaufelberger was a big influence in my life in construction. But okay, so you were involved, as you mentioned, in the UW construction management program. How did you get involved with them? And then secondly, after your more about a little bit your role in the CM department. And for those older people, we would say BCon, building
Yeah.
construction. But secondly, after you talk about your role with the CM program, what are you focused on doing today? Your next things you might be doing?
Well, first of all, my career is weaved. Education has been an important part of it, and I've weaved into teaching and weaved out of teaching, weaved into teaching. I taught it, took a sabbatical from Boeing, taught at Cal Poly, ended up at WSU for a few years teaching in their construction management program, went back to industry, so I weaved back and forth. And then after I started teaching in the evenings in the UW back in 2007. And so for many years I taught. I started the UW Design Build graduate class, and for many years I taught in the evenings until I came back from China and then retired from Boeing, and was visiting the department, and they said, "Hey, we're looking, we got a position open." And I said, "Well, that sounds interesting." And I decided to join as a full-time faculty, which I did. I retired in December, so now it's what's the next steps? I'm not ready to sort of professionally just drop out and live in Miami or someplace like that on the beach. That's not me. I'm taking more of a time studying more historical aspects of construction, to tell the story of the people behind it. I'm more of a constructorian, as I would call myself, is sort of studying. And I just released an article today that's going to be a 9-part series in LinkedIn about building of the Centennial Exposition in 1876, and following it and weaving stories back and forth, not only the construction aspects of it, the people aspects, but the trade and the manufacturing aspects of the rise and fall of the industrial here in the U.S. I even tie it into the Duwamish River area and how the rise and fall. And I actually have a couple of maps and was involved in tearing down with Boeing one of the oldest old manufacturing facilities. So that's what I'm doing now. I love, do deep dive to live in that period of time and really understand the people behind it. We read books about buildings, and we learn who the architect was or who the engineer was, but we never know how it got built. How did they project manage it? What was their challenges of building it? We just look at the architectural style of the building and make comments on it. But the real story is behind that. It's the people that took to build it. One of the books that I just purchased that I'm reading now is Men at Work, the Empire State Building. And this is telling the story of the men at that time who built it, who they were. Now, we all admire the picture of the people having lunch sitting on the beam. Everybody has seen it, but who knows who those peoples are? This author, Glenn, did that research and found out who those people were. It's the story about the people that build it. To me, that's fascinating to sort of hear about and give recognition to those guys who sat on that beam. I have the office photo here, and we've all seen it. There's all kinds of memes about that photo of sitting on the beam on the high rise. And so that's what I'm kind of doing right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for sharing about your experiences too, which leads to my next question. I'm curious, what is a project you've worked on that you're particularly proud of? And like, could you explain why that particular project stands out to you?
So that would be my project in China. That was a project that I originally went on I started on the planning aspects of the project, more on the real estate, the planning, how we were going to pull it off, and then wrote the contracts side of it and the requirements side of it. And then when the project was going to kick off, I said, no, I'll go over, we need to have someone at Boeing presence there. And so something that went from a 3-week business trip ended up into a 3-year assignment. I lived in the Hilton for 3 years. So,
That's really interesting.
what it is I love the project.
Mm,
And it was not as much what we were building, it was the people.
mm,
It was the connection, the cultural exchange, everything. And one of my favorite photos is on International Women's Day, which just was a few weeks ago, that the general contractor, International Women's Day is much bigger in China and Vietnam and other locations where I've been and experienced it. So they were inviting me to a celebration, and then it was for the women's in the office. And I said, "Oh, we had a fair amount of women out in construction, much different than in the U.S. construction." And I said, "What about the women out in the field?" And they said, "Oh, well, what can we do for them?" And I said, "Oh, we can give a little bar of chocolate or something." And they go, "Oh, okay." The next morning they came back and they had all these little bags of gifts and said, "We're ready." And we went to the gate, and I stood there and shook the hand of all the women as they were entering the construction gate. And so I have a photo of me with the construction women laborers, shaking their hands. To me, in their faces of appreciation, of recognition, and their faces of just in shock that someone would stop and recognize them.
yeah.
I ended up the people in the field, because I was the only, for one thing, the only woman really that was out there for quite a few at the time, and in the sense of on the construction management side. Also, the only foreign woman. Definitely for the first year, I definitely stood out. That was, to me, was the specialness of that project, was the cultural, the differences of construction, and basically supporting the people that were building the project. And I have some great photos, great learning experiences from the cultural construction differences. But that would rank up there in the highest.
Yay, thank you so much for sharing. We had kind of, I guess you've kind of answered part of this question earlier in this interview, but um, to just like fizzle it down just to one piece of advice that you have from your career, specifically in construction, um, something that you believe is most important for long-term success, what would it be?
I think it's the self recognition that you belong there. So don't have that doubt in your mind that this isn't a place for women. Even if, ignore what you hear in the background or anything like that. You belong there. And I think that was the important thing that I learned in the early 70s. And I would pass that same message on is don't, trust and believe in yourself is the key. And then find the right support. Find your right clan of people behind you that's going to, if you have issues or you need to talk about an issue, you have support. I didn't have that. I was in a total different generation. I was amazed at Women's Day this year on LinkedIn. I couldn't believe the flood of posts. So I went to Google to see the how much um, women in construction was posted or looked at or searched is
Mhm.
the right term, the search. And I couldn't believe over the 10-year period, flat, 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 and then chink up. And I could see that. I felt that with Langton. So there is a big recognition that we need women in construction. So there's a lot of noise behind it, and there's a lot of people out there. What is this? What is this career? Because there's been so much articles and so much written about it and so much testimony from women that I didn't know when I saw on LinkedIn that was posting personal stories. I would like so that they would see that there were people behind them that sort of read their story. But this year stood out more than any other year, and that's really positive.
Yay. Yeah. I also have another question. Is there a book that has greatly influenced your life, or career, and what impact would you say it had on you?
Books for I'm quite the technical person, so there are books that are out there that technical. But one book that I read several years ago, and this is the constructorian in me. When I read The Devil in White City and how the Devil in White City weaves the technical portion of building the Chicago World's Fair and how they weaved a personal story, of a murder that was going on. This writing style, this writing skill, learning about the era, of the Chicago World's Fair was incredible. White City was, engineering wise, the big first Ferris wheel. There's so much behind it that this author's, Eric Larson's his writing style is something I would love to because he weaves stories from past to present and things like that. So that would be one. It's not a leadership book. Many people will pull out all these leadership books, but it there's that side of me. There's the management side of me, and then there's that historian side of me. And so that book is kind of the highlight and pulls it. I'm sitting here and, I can share with you that, the article that I just post, this is 1876 engineering books. There's an article that I found when I bought this book at Powell Book um, in 1999. And when I brought it home and read it, it said the American competition. When I read that article, it just, what are they talking about? And reading that from the 1886, 1876 version of that story is stayed in me for years, and I finally has had the time to write it. And I actually used that article in one of my international graduate classes where I stripped out the names and I said, who are they talking about? And everybody in that article would say China, Vietnam, Japan. And I go, nope, they're talking about America. And so this is that stage of manufacturing and mice where America finally grew was based in the 1876 Centennial Fair. So, um, so I have to say this 1876 book is also one of my favorites because it opened my eyes to looking at the world differently.
So you mentioned that professional occupations in construction has seen like a growth, but on the management side, you say that there's maybe a discrepancy.
Yeah, this year the numbers really shocked me. So, 20, 23% of the women are on the professional side, and on the management side, we've been doing a good job of continuing to increase. And what I found is that in 2025 we lost 31,000 women in the management roles, yet men gained 71,000. So that's why I asked the question, what's going on? Is that the broken rung? So why we need to look at that. And hopefully was there something going on this past, last year? These are average numbers for the year. But I'm watching the numbers close because if we see at the end of 2026 that number continues to decrease, then there's something going on. And it's been labeled as called the broken rung, where entry level leadership doesn't move up the first rung. We're not talking about breaking the ceilings. We're talking about getting on the first rung. you know.
Nice. All right. Well, I am waiting for whenever you come out with a book of all your history and your background and your complete stories.
Yeah.
But if people are interested in connecting or learning more about you and the UW construction management program, what are the ways they might do each of those?
So yeah, you can always connect with me through LinkedIn right now. Email. My UW email will always be with me. That doesn't go away even if I retired. It will be forwarded to me. So that's another way to connect with the university construction management program. A double alum from the program. I highly recommend talk to take a visit to the program, meet the faculty, meet Giovanni, who is the department head, talk to some of the faculty. It's a great program, and there's some great professors in the program.
I will concur, having been with my got my
We're
hard
both
hat
alum.
here for
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
building.
yeah. I'll bring out here. I've got, for anybody that watches this that are construction management students, they'll recognize the hat. I didn't get it when I graduated, and I asked the department, I'm an alum. I want one of those hats, and so I do. I do have one.
Well, good. I got one for my BCon degree in '94, and then when I graduated behind you in the construction management master's program, weren't you the first to graduate? Is that your distinguished
that's
honor too?
that's correct. That's correct.
Well, I don't know. I was probably in the first 10 or so, but then I did graduate from it. But what a wonderful program. It benefited me pivoting into real estate. I rely on my construction background that I did out of college for my first,
Yeah.
number of years before pivoting into development. So they go hand in hand. And I keep telling our real estate students, take construction classes because if you're going to do a development project, you have to know, I would say, roll out a set of blueprints. That's dating myself, but the way things go. But yet, and for construction students, they should take urban planning and real estate classes as well because they mix together.
Yeah, I strongly recommend for business students like yourself, Jasmine, or the real estate, do a minor. in construction management, because you're going to manage projects, whether you go to real estate, especially in real estate. And so you need to have that little bit of background of what you're going to manage. And whether you're going to be in facility management, or whether you're going to be in real estate development, or whether you're going to work for a general contractor or an architect or a civil engineer, having at least a minor in construction management gives you that background of the risk. I tell our CM students, I don't call you construction managers, I call you risk managers, because that's what construction's about. You're managing tight budgets, tight schedules, you're managing clients and design, and there's so much that you're managing that, I'm really disappointed that when I see the numbers out there of CM students recognized next to project management, that the number is so low because it's the same skill set. It's just you're managing something different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I've seen so much parallelism between my business classes, taking my operations management class, and seeing like the responsibilities as like a construction manager. Um, project management is like kind of a more broader thing, but you can learn from different departments, like the business
Yes.
perspective or the real estate perspective. So yeah, I 100% agree. I think that um, a lot of the things go hand in hand between business and construction management.
Yeah. And especially in real estate, you're looking at a piece of property. You better be thinking about where's the utilities, where's this, what's it going to take? Is this site going to be able to hold the building? There's the other factors of, sales and things like that. But if you can't build anything on the property, it's there's no value, or it's going to be double the cost to build on that property. Then maybe that's not a good development
Yeah.
strategy for you. You need to move to another piece.
Yep, yep. It all comes together. Well, Darlene, thanks so much for coming on, sharing your experiences today. It was just a joy to actually get this interview done after years of practicing and going back to when we were classmates to
Yeah.
25 years later to begin to be, we'd be up on the stage at graduation together.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Darlene. It's so wonderful hearing your experiences and just listening to how you think and your perspective in this world.
Yeah, so thank you, Jasmine. It was a pleasure meeting you, and also the business aspect. And hopefully, you'll go back to the business school and say, we need to look at maybe more students from the business school minoring in real estate or minoring in construction management. And Jeff, yes, we're alumni. We were in classes together. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to, be alongside of you at the graduation, the last few couple of graduations. So it was nice to be on the stage with you and enjoying the students that we were coaching to the next generation to carry on.
Absolutely. And someday I'll get to teach a construction course. I don't get over the CM department much, but moving over again, and this life's about pivoting. I went back for my master's in real estate at 50. And
Yeah.
so lifelong learning, and now it opened the door to me be able to teach Jasmine and many other fine students in real estate. So with that, I want to say thank you to both of you for being here today.
Thank
Thanks.
you.